Hey BookTube, it's Charlie from Reader Turned Writer, and today I am sharing some of my childhood reads that you may never have heard of before. So all of these books are books from my own childhood that I felt like were a big part of my childhood. Most of them I owned. I'm sure my mom got them for me. Some of them I know my mom got for me, and so I would reread them because I had them around. I haven't read a lot of them for a very, very long time, and rereading them as an adult may be a totally different experience than my experience reading them as a child. I don't know. But these are just ones that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, or that didn't seem as popular when I was a child, but that I read a lot, and so were a big part of who I became and a big part of just my childhood. And when I remember my childhood, I think of these books. The first one that I think of is Trixie Belden by Julie Campbell, and this is a series that has 30-something books in it. I haven't read all of them, but I've read most of them. I may be missing like 5 or 6 of them just because my mom didn't own them. These are like kind of like Nancy Drew type books where it's a girl sleuth and she solves mysteries with her friends, but it's definitely set in a more rural area, and she rides horses a lot, and she has some really good friends, and the morals that are taught in it and just the friendships and the sweetness of the books are incredible. And I have reread these more recently than most of the other books, and I know that they're phenomenal. And if you're looking for a book similar to Nancy Drew for your own kids, but you don't really want to do the whole Nancy Drew thing, I know some parents are against Nancy Drew. I'm not. I loved Nancy Drew as a child as well. But these are a really good pick because they teach a lot of really good morals, like hard work and honesty and friendship and loyalty, but they're also really, really fun in the same way that Nancy Drew was. The next book is The 3 NBs of Julian Drew by James M. Dean. This is actually Deem. This is actually a book that I got as like a prize for the reading challenge at my library, the summer reading program or whatever, and if you complete it all you gotta pick a book, and this is one that I picked, and I really, really liked it. As a child, I think it really helped me form a lot of empathy and think about issues that might have been beyond my age at the time, but in a good way, in a way that wasn't too much for a child. It's a book about child abuse, but it is written for a younger audience, and I think as an adult you could really enjoy it as well still. The format is a little bit different because it is Julian writing in his notebook about the experiences that he has. At first he has a hard time writing, and so it's hard to understand what he's even trying to say, but as he continues to write and you learn more about him, your heart just goes out to him. And this is a really, really good book that I've never heard anybody else ever talk about. I actually think it's better than A Child Called It, where it talks about some of the same trials that a child would go through, but it does so in a way that is better for a younger audience and not quite so hard to read, but still bringing out the empathy and the love and the compassion that you feel towards these kids who experience child abuse and the horrible, horrible things that people can do to children. Next is Wanted by Carolyn B. Cooney. This is kind of a wide range of genres and types of books, but this is kind of like a thriller type book, but for younger audiences, and so nothing super emotionally scarring or anything happens in this book, but it's someone basically murders this girl's father, and then she is framed for the murder, so she goes on the run. And so it's kind of one of those, oh, she's on the run books, which is kind of fun to read as a child, and then she's trying to solve the mystery of it, and there's like a lot of tension and suspense in it, but it's also, like I said, not too emotionally jarring for a younger audience. And I loved this book. I reread it so many times. You can see it's pretty worn, just it's a soft cover, but it's I think I got this one brand new from my mom one time, just for a holiday maybe, I don't know, but I loved this book. Then I have Mini Mysteries by Ruth Harley, and this is a book that my mom had when she was younger, and then it was just on her shelves and she gave it to me, and it's just a collection of mysteries about this group of kids that solve them. And I remember reading this and rereading it, and I loved mystery books as a child, and so this one was really fun for me to read, especially since it was so short and so obviously old. It's one of the oldest books that I own, I think. I don't own a lot of old books. So then we have Nutty and the Case of the Mastermind Thief by Dean Hughes. And this book, I think we must have got it at a library sale or something because there's library stickers all over it, but they're all crossed out like they do for library sales. And it's a mystery about this kid named Nutty who basically is in charge of all this money for his school, but then somebody steals it, so he and his friends are trying to figure out who it is. And it is hilarious. I remember reading it basically every year because I would go back to it and back to it and back to it because it was just so clever. Some of the things that happened in this book were so clever, but it works really well for a younger audience as well. I actually would really recommend reading this if you enjoy mystery books. And then I have Jack Weyland. That's the author. I'm not going to share a specific book. This is just one that I happen to own by him, but he's written like 30-something books. They're all LDS fiction books, I think aimed at like teenage girls, and they all follow, they're basically LDS contemporaries, and I loved Jack Weyland. When I was in like 7th grade, I read all of them. I would just go to the library and get as many as they had and take them home and read them all, and then come back and get as many as they had until I'd read them all, and I just was crazy over Jack Weyland. And I didn't actually own any as a child, but when my mom realized that I liked them so much, she started buying a few for me, and I picked some up at local thrift shops and stuff, but I really, really loved Jack Weyland. And then we have The Bodies in the Bessledorf Hotel by Phyllis, Reynolds, Naylor. And this is basically about a couple kids who live in a hotel because their parents run the hotel, and they end up catching a murderer, or trying to catch a murderer, and I don't know, it was just one of those books that I owned and I would read over and over again because it was my kind of book, and I actually really enjoyed it as well. Then we have What's an Average Kid Like Me Doing Way Up Here by Ivy Ruckman. One of my friends was actually selling this at a yard sale, and so she just gave it to me instead of me buying it, I think. But it's just about this kid who works with his teacher to kind of save his school. The things that they do were really funny, and I feel like this is actually part of the start of my love of entrepreneurial things and marketing and things like that, because a lot of what they do, they really wanted to make a change and they found ways to do so, and I really like that. Then I had this book. This is totally a girl book. There's The Girl Who Knew It All, and then on the back, it's upside down on the back, is 4th Grade Celebrity, and they're both by Patricia, Reilly, Giff, and I read both of these basically every summer growing up until I was old enough to no longer be interested in it. This is definitely not one that I think adults would really enjoy reading for the first time, but I might enjoy reading it for nostalgia's sake, and I definitely think that if you were 12 or under, that you would enjoy it. 4th Grade Celebrity is just about a girl who wants to stand out, basically because she's jealous of her older sister, and The Girl Who Knew It All is just about a girl who basically thinks she knows it all, and she has to learn that you can't know it all or be a know-it-all if you want to really have friends. I actually don't own the next few just because I either never owned them or at one point got rid of them, but the next one is The Kid Who Ran for President, and this one is about a kid who runs for president and like legitimately runs for president, and one of his friends becomes his campaign managers, and it's totally unrealistic, but they do it in such a way that makes you think it almost could be realistic, and that makes it really fun, especially as a kid, to read. And there's actually a sequel called The Kid Who Became President, which I didn't enjoy as much as the first one, but I remember reading both of them more than once and really enjoying them. Then we have Emeralds and Espionage. This is one that I got from my school library, but I remember reading the whole series. There's a whole bunch. I went back and reread it as an adult, and I have to say the writing was not as... the writing wasn't as good as I remember it being. The plot was also a little unrealistic and kind of jumpy, but I really enjoyed reading it just kind of for nostalgia's sake, and I do think that if you were between the ages of 12 and 16 that you would still really enjoy reading the series, because when I read it I was in 7th or 8th grade and I didn't notice any problems with the writing style at the time because I just wasn't mature enough, I think, with my reading to recognize that. But I loved the story. It's about a girl whose family is spies and she kind of gets pulled back into the spy world, but she's actually LDS and I'm LDS, and so I really connected with that, and there's a love story going on. Some of the other books have really good stories too. I actually would be interested in reading some of the other books to see if the writing improves as the series goes on, because sometimes that's the case. And the last book I'm going to mention was actually one of my favorites growing up. It's called The Dollhouse Murders. It's about this girl who has a younger sister with special needs, and she gets really tired of trying to take care of her younger sister and being responsible for her, so she runs away and lives with her aunt. But their family has some hidden secrets. Her grandparents were killed, they were murdered before she was born. And her aunt has a lot of hidden feelings about that. And in the attic of the house that she's staying in, there's a dollhouse that was handmade of the house that they're in, with the individual family members, dolls of the individual family members in the dollhouse. And it starts moving on its own. And so she's trying to solve the mystery of the dollhouse, but also balance trying to work things out with her family and her sister, and also not get on the bad side of her aunt, because every time the dollhouse is moved around, her aunt kind of gets upset because of how tragic the story of her parents being killed was. It was a very, very good read. It was like a murder book. I didn't feel it was too much for a young girl. I'm sure I read it when I was 8 or 9 the first time, and then reread it many times until I got quite a bit older and started reading other books, and I never felt like it was too scary for a young child. So those are some of the books that I remember reading as a child that I haven't heard people talk about or haven't seen around, but that really became a big part of my life during my childhood as I read and reread them. Have you heard of any of these books or read them? Let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you have any childhood reads that most people have never heard of, and you can go ahead and let me know that in the comments below as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.